Well, first of all, thank you for all of you coming here for a book reading. I think when I call that as a book reading, I don't know what's the best way we can really have much more efficient way to really read a book. But I think, let me just say something first about why I choose the first book we're going to read or maybe discuss about the book is called The Foundations of Buddhism by Rupert Gethin. Rupert Gethin, Professor Rupert Gethin, actually he was my supervisor when I did my PhD, and and I guess at least I know him quite well because I did my PhD under him for 7 years. And I guess, one way is because I know his styles and I know why he wanted to write this book. And he also, definitely when he was in the University of Bristol in England, when he's actually still there. So he basically highly recommend the book. And I met a lot of scholars around, even in America. So most of the scholars in America are very, actually told me that they like Professor Rupert Gethin's books. One thing is that certainly I think he has a very interesting approach, which is normally you don't find in other books. So I just want to give a few of them. One thing is that Rupert Gethin was trained as a Theravada Buddhism. For people who don't understand the term, like a lot of the terminology maybe we often use in Buddhism. So if you don't understand, you could just raise your hand. So the Theravada term, when we say Theravada, right? Just let me write it down first. Okay. So usually in Chinese we translate as 善作部佛教。有时候太久没有写中文。Okay. Okay. But of course, normally in Chinese, it's because the Sanzhobu, unfortunately, usually in Chinese, for Chinese people, always believe that the Sanzhobu is a kind of like a Hinayana school, just in Chinese called 小乘佛教. Okay, but that is not true. Okay, I want to say something later. So, and those are the terms are often you'll find in Buddhism. Okay, so. But just sometimes for, in order to be polite, that we don't want to say 善作部 or certainly 小乘佛教, especially now in nowadays when you gather together, you say, oh, you are the believer of the 小乘佛教. It sounds, kind of like, it's not really polite in such a way. So normally what we call nowadays, if you want to address more politely, you say, are you studying Buddhism, become like what kind of Buddhism? You might be just addressed as, we say that, kind of what we call the Southern Buddhism, 南传佛教. Okay. All right. I just want to say a few words, and I should be, start off this topic. So the term actually 南传佛教 is a Chinese term. So it's Southern Buddhism. It's invented only recently, maybe roughly like 1970 something or 1970. It could be even a little earlier, like 1950 or 1960 something. I forgot the really date, but generally because when the monks, the monks and the lay people, when they have a meeting together, they discuss this issue as the so-called Mahayana. So in the Chinese, people think that mostly they are Mahayana, 大乘佛教. Okay. Mostly they think they always accuse the other as the Hinayana. So that's why then they think maybe the best we should invent a term that is called the Buddhism being transmitted to the south. That's called 南传佛教. And then the Buddhism that transmitted to the west, not to the north, from take the Indian as the center of transmission of Buddhism. So then that is mean the 北传佛教. So and that's only kind of like people nowadays take it. When you say you are the Southern Buddhism, it means you are like a 小乘佛教 or 三座部佛教. In other words, mean like a Theravada as one of the. And when you say the Beichuan Fojiao or the Northern Buddhism, that refer to Japan, Korea, and Tibet, and then like the Tibetan Buddhism as well as Chinese Buddhism. So that is called the Beichuan Fojiao. Anyway, this book is interesting. One way is because normally people writing about the foundation of Buddhism are kind of like Buddhist teachings. They might be based on the Northern Buddhist teachings. But this book was written by a scholar, but based on the Theravada tradition. Or you could say as, I like to call it as a back to the word they like to call it Theravada tradition. Or you could say the basic tradition, because the Theravada tradition as the emphasis, the importance of the earliest Buddhist teachings. So, and then to write a book. So, and that approach itself is lack in general. Because talking about study Buddhism internationally, usually highly influenced because of Tibetan Buddhism. So, and when they study the Buddhist text, they will directly to say, okay, this is a Tibetan Buddhism, and the Buddhism itself is the, okay, that's what the Buddha said, is very authentic in such a way. But if you look at the historically, in terms of literature, so you do have this earlier literature and the later literature, and you know, like what we call the earlier period of literatures, and the from first century period of literature, and then even from like for example in Tibet. So, and then they started some literature came from India, but actually if you look at for literature study, so it came quite late, maybe after 5th century, 6th century, 7th century. So I mean, this is I guess it's one of the good approach for people to read through it, because just for chronological study, kind of like a literature study, so you know which one is early literature, how the early literature try to explain Buddhism is about, and then how they've been transformed in the later period. That actually we will be discussed that in the maybe last 2 chapters in the book. Okay, and all right. I mean, certainly, I mean the main purpose of the book, why we picked this book to call the Foundation of Buddhism, because the book itself gives you a very good scholarly discussion, as well as the very good basic teachings, instruction, I would say. I mean, on the basic teaching, instruction on the basic teachings. Okay. All right. Rupert Gethin, I mean, if you like, you definitely can search for his article. He writes a lot of books, and he's very famous for 2 things. One is that one of the Greek scholars in early Buddhism, and he definitely knows Sanskrit and Pali very well. And the second thing is that he's very famous for another study, what we call the Buddhist psychology. It's called Abhidharma. So, and he could be one of the pioneer scholar in the Buddhist Abhidharma in England. Okay, you could say even in Europe. Usually, even in America, whenever there's a conference about the Abhidharma, I know it's very hard. Let me just write the term. Those are the few terms. Maybe it sounds very strange for you, but I mean, it's important. The Abhidharma. In Chinese, in Chinese there's so many translations, but usually Chinese, we follow the more wet, huh? No, I think it's wet maybe. You're using the no, I wait in this case. In Chinese, sometimes we translate Abhidharma as 对法藏. Okay. No, it's wet. You just wait. Yeah. It's 对法藏. So. It's okay. I think I had to wait. Yeah. Oh. Abhidharma. Okay. So I think I will wait. Yeah. Well, since we have somebody interested in psychology, so I could say, at least some people who study psychology in the past, and or even psychiatric. When I was in Washington, like in Seattle, I know a few friends who are psychiatric as well. And then once you know Abhidharma, they will find actually even this Abhidharma what is Abhidharma? Generally means it's one kind of Buddhist canon. It's after the Buddha passed away, and then all some of the famous the Buddha's disciples collected what the Buddha is teaching and put away all these stories and the background and the cause of the teachings, like why the teaching is there, but only just to selectively to find out, select all these the main items of the Buddha's teachings, and then we have a kind of system. For example, give you one. For example, different schools, they have a different kind of Abhidharma. For example, like when one of the school, like I just mentioned, like a Theravada, according to the Abhidharma system, we divided a persons into like a kind of like a four main topic to talk about. First thing is about the mind, and the second is about the mind association, and then the third thing is about the material. That means our physical form. It could be external, internal, physical form. And the fourth thing is about the Nibbana, the higher teachings, like how someone can be liberated, you know. So that is called Abhidharma. But in Chinese, actually, in earlier time, the way they understand Abhidharma is quite good, because they understand Abhidharma in a way, mean you could be confronted to the Dharma, means you directly observe the Dharma, mean called Abhi. This is a Pali word or Sanskrit. Abhi you could understand as mean you confronted. Confronted Dharma mean, you know, definitely mean the items or phenomena. So, and then you confront it with the items or confront it with the phenomena. So Abhidharma. So for example, it's one of the very difficult thing when we are learning in the university and the school. One of the subjects we find the most difficult. Usually you could proud to tell people, if you say, I am the teacher of Abhidharma, they would think, oh, they would thought you must be very, very talented, must be very, you know, powerful. Because, for example, in Buddhist understanding, one mind comes, you could have one kind of mind arise when you see a thing, but then we divided, there are 89 types of minds, okay? It could be this type of mind, that type of mind, this type of mind. And each kind of mind, they have this, at least, usually we put it like 54 types of mind association. But they can never have 54 types of mind association together. It could, the lesser one that you could have the mind association as a 7 type, but sometimes you could have 26 types of mind association. In other words, according to Abhidharma, like let's say if I'm thinking one thing, I'm thinking who the person is, right? And then this sort of mind could be associated with, I want to say, it could be based on something, based on our greed or based on our, it could based on our good quality like the meditation power. Then one type of mind arise, and there are other association mind like the focus. Anyway, those are that's one thing called Abhidharma. Okay, we will deal with this subject in one chapter a little bit about that. So just imagine that if we have to describe that we have 89 types of minds in every moment, okay, and then every type of mind also could be have something linked to it, and then. That, of course, the purpose is not to analyze the mind. For the Buddhist teachings, is the purpose is that while do meditation, or you could able to check what kind of mind they are, and what kind of thing associate with it, and what kind of thing dissociate with it, and then you could have a further meditation to go beyond this understanding this kind of mind, so that you know the mind change all the time. You know. Anyway. Let's just back to our thing. Let's back to our reading. So Rupert Gethin is also famous for his, another field called Abhidharma. All right. So far we learned 2 things. One thing we know this book could be. You could say that the main training of the professor Rupert Gethin is from Theravada Buddhism. Okay. I mean the second is that actually he's famous. not only because of his scholarly study, but then also he is well known in England, so in UK, because of the Abhidharma teachings as well, and which is one of the very difficult texts to study. Okay, right. So then you know where this book comes from, then it will be much easier, so that you will not get confused. Sometimes if you find something mentioned here, could be a little bit different from what you know. Okay, and you'll find, why I never heard of this thing? And where did this come from? Why what I heard is quite different? Then this is what I like to see in the next time or in the future, that people can ask questions and raise whatever question you have. And then, of course, if you can find some proof or even comment, whatever, that would be much more useful, much more helpful, I would say, or healthier, even for the book discussion. Okay, I guess. All right. Now let's presumably, because this is our first class, maybe the best way we do in the next time, that if you have time. But I'm not. I don't want to force your guy, so that I don't want to intimidate your guy. Like, you know, you don't read before coming here, so don't come. So and maybe the result will be I will be just talking to myself. So I guess certainly I would still encourage you if you can read a little bit before you come in here. So that will be get much more. I guess that we can have much more smoother discussion on that topic. Right? Since this is the first class, so let's just begin with the chapter 1, the Buddha also. I guess the books started to trying to say in the page 6, all right, if you have a book or even you have the copy. So the historical Buddha. Now, this subtitle trying to mention about historical Buddha, because it is always for religious studies. One of the interesting things is that you maybe say, I believe in Sun Wukong, for example, like the monkey. Do you know that the 西游记 in Chinese is called Journey to the West. If you know, there's some kind of very popular Chinese epic, not epic actually, the Chinese kind of like the book called Journey to the West, with the monkey with a piggy head. You haven't seen that, I see. And that's but of course in Chinese culture, and then like the Sun Wukong, that the monkey king, and he become kind of idol to be worshipped, in culture. And then also people even believe in, like, if they have a certain kind of possession, like kind of like possession, and they would believe that the monkey king do possess them, and they could predict the people's life and so forth. I want to say that, of course, for religious study, and there was one aspect of that is that we need to discuss first whether there is such a kind of really, in historically, there was a Buddha, or like there was a monkey king, for example, And that's why the first chapter have to solve the problem that, is there any evidence, even archaeologically, that you could prove that 2,600 years ago, there was really one person called the Buddha was born in Nepal, maybe in those days called Dhammadipa. Okay, it's one of the Indian territory. Now it's no longer belong to India. So, but usually we still say he was born in India. Anyway, but literally you could say, strictly speaking, you have to say he was born in Nepal. Okay, and whether it was true, but then unfortunately. And then recently there were two arguments about that. One argued that actually the Buddha was born somehow in the other side of India. Now they call India. So, and then some other archaeology found that it should be, because it's always believed that the Buddha was born in Nepal. Now in Lumbini there was a place, Lumbini. But then another archaeology found, no, actually the Buddha was not born in that Lumbini, but was born in the border of India. Still is debatable whether which is true. But of course, for lots of people, like as a Buddhist, when they go for pilgrimage, they definitely just go to Lumbini. You heard of the place called Lumbini, right? So anyway, I just want to say in a scholarly study, though, so this is one of the topic, one of the issue that we need to at least to know that there was someone. You could say that is archaeological. You could be proof already that the Buddha really there was something a person in the past that was born, called, and then being called as a Buddha. Okay. And what is his name? Of course, we know that usually even we said, even the book mentioned that even we know that before someone like a prince called Siddhartha, okay. So a prince called Siddhartha was born in Lumbini, and he was born as a prince. Okay. The word Siddhartha actually it means someone who have achievement. Okay. It is a Sanskrit word. It means someone who achieved something. So and then the story also said, as a legend, said that he was grew up as a happily family as a prince. And then, but of course, if you look at the lots of sources, he did have a lot of pressure, because of in the border at that time, a lot of debate over who should be rule the country, and that's why, according to the scholar, usually believe that he left the country to become a monk or renounced, is because the pressure was so huge that he didn't want to take the responsibility. Okay, but even though this kind of story may never been told in Chinese sources. Because we have to understand, as a religion, when you transmit one religion to another religion, you're not going to tell the king that he was kind of depression a little bit and he left the place because he didn't want to rule the country because there's a lot of responsibility there, right? This is a difference between when you study academic and then also when you're in the religious field. And the religious field will say everything is perfect. At least it has to go according with the code that we understand what a great leader is about, But but for academic, it's sometimes they let you dig something, a dark side of it, Okay. All right. And anyway, but there's no doubt that there was a person who left the place because it was recorded. So not only in archaeologically, even recently. In Afghanistan also they found something, and then they really found something that was a relic of the Buddha mentioned on the archaeological, Not only in archaeological you could find the evidence, and also definitely from other religions also, because other religions in India, there were so many religions in those days, they did mention there was a Buddha, who are really, in such and such. So that you do then it's a kind of proof that there was such a person called a Buddha. It's not a mythical figure that you believe a religion, you can invent anything, especially in the past. Nowadays we are in a very different generation now, so we don't easily, especially talking about the young people, don't easily believe that, okay, you said there was a Buddha, I never seen it, how do you prove there was a Buddha, like that, Anyway, there was this is the first chapter, just want to, I guess, the historical Buddha, just want to say, evidently there was a Buddha. You could find some relic there, and you could find some inscription was mentioned. Such a person was exist, And then they say that they enshrined something, no, I think I need to jump that because you could ask me the question later. Let me see what I need to mention. So, and then the name Buddha. Like even nowadays in India, we always refer to as like, okay, the Buddha, right? The Buddha. So we kind of think that the Buddha is a kind of like a name of the Siddhartha, okay? Before he became a Buddha. Actually, that was not true. Buddha is just a title, like you say a professor, like you say, what else? Like a doctor. Then when you mention a person is a doctor, you somehow know that that person have a certain quality. So, at least he's a doctor. He must know something about medicine, depending on how to understand the medicine. But the same thing when you refer a Buddha, that was a term actually exists in India for a long time ago. That always means somebody who was awakened, who are spiritually have a breakthrough, and that's what the Buddha, to an Indian context, I was talking about in Indian context in the old day, in those days, 2,600 years ago, that the Buddha just referred to somebody who might be, highly practiced their spirituality, and they have a breakthrough, and then they have what the Indian understand as the more advanced, the most powerful wisdom they have. Then you could bestow a name called the Buddha. Okay. But of course, this term is definitely used very differently in like a religious field, and then also certainly even in those who are Chinese, then they know the word Buddha is kind of, to a lot of normal folks, they might think that kind of like the highest God, right? To some people, and but then, or even maybe, I don't know, in America, I guess in America, Buddha is kind of like a name like Jesus, right? So become someone spiritually powerful. So, and it's almost like a name, so for them, right? And in Sri Lanka, of course, it's different. When you say the word is Buddha, like in Thailand, for example, it's not just the title. I mean, even though they know it's a title, but I mean that culturally they will understand the word Buddha is more like a kind of a spell, right? For example, when you get fear, you could say, chant the Buddha, Buddha. It's kind of like you have a spell, and you could put off all these kind of evil spirits, But anyway, back to that. Originally, actually, the word Buddha, even from Buddhist scriptures, not the Mahayana. I was talking about like earlier. That's why I'm saying now you have to understand. In early Buddhist texts, the Buddha is just a title. The title refers to someone who is awakened. It's called the Buddha. Okay. But of course, please, even though it's like that nowadays, of course, you don't say I'm awakened, so I'm a Buddha, right? And even the term, actually, they do have even the term Buddha also has been what I want to say has been developed or has been the term actually been used in a different period of time, have a different kind of connotation too. For example, like in early Buddhism, they don't believe that you could have a second Buddha, because it's always been understood the Buddha should be the founder of that religion. But then, for example, like in Tibetan Buddhism or some kind of Mahayana Buddhism too, that the Buddha is being understood as someone who have reached to a spirituality, reached to a certain stage, that not as Arhat, so it's called the Buddha. Anyway, I don't know whether that's meaningful, but it's really, I think it's very important. Arhat, okay. Sometimes we say Arahant. It's fine. Sorry, because 我在这边写，你应该可以看得到哈。Okay. Sometimes we say Rahan, okay, Rohan, okay. Let me rephrase again. The word Buddha in early Buddhism is always understood as someone not just because he's awakened, because Arhat or Rohan or Arahan or Arhat also could be awakened, complete awakening one. But the Buddha also it's a title only used for Siddhartha, kind of like in early Buddhism, because he was the one found the Buddhism, already discovered the teaching of the Buddhism. Okay, so it's called Buddha. But then that kind of understood change in the period of time, like in Mahayana Buddhism, especially in later Mahayana Buddhism, the word Buddha it's only mean someone who reached to the highest state of the spirituality. So that's why it could be. They also could believe that someone could be a Buddha when you reach that stage. Like in Tibetan Buddhism, for example, they believe that now they have a shortened time. There's one of the very powerful way that you can reach to the Buddha, to become a Buddha. Of course, in America, they like to use that term. And also for propagation purpose, even sometimes I talk, people ask you, could you do meditation and become a Buddha? And I have to say yes, according to the belief. But more precisely, I would say no. I would say you could be Arhat, but you cannot be a Buddha. Okay, Because in early Buddhism, the term Buddha, as I say, is only used for the Siddhartha who, afterward become enlightened under the Bodhi tree. Okay, you get it now? What's the difference between that? All right. So, but please understand, the word Arhat and the Buddha, it always goes together. But however, in China, history is completely different. The word Arhat, it's always like a very powerful, but still small. That's why it belongs to the small vehicle, just now mentioned. They are not that powerful as the Buddha or even the Bodhisattva. I'm going to mention maybe that later. Bodhisattva means the Pusa. Okay. Okay. All right. What is meant by the Arhat? Let me just say first. We know the Buddha means awakening. Arhat, the original word means Arhat, actually it means someone who cut off all the defilements. Fan now, okay, it's called Arhat. And what is that purpose of the Arhat? So-called, who is qualified to be called Arhat? It's someone who cut off all the defilements, and that person who cut off the defilement would not be reborn again. Will not be reborn again. 就是断除轮回. It's called Arhat. So that's why what we call the Buddha must have the quality of Arhat, as an Arhat. Because you could call that someone who is a Buddha also can be called as an Arhat. Because that person, he or she has to be able to cut off all the defilements and will cut off all reincarnation. Okay. All right. So, why I want to mention this also, even in the book you will know, sometimes when you say that they found the relic of the Buddha, or they will say they will found the relic of the Arhat, okay, who is the founder of Buddhism as the Buddha, okay. In other words, I want to say the Arhat and the Buddha, even though they take different connotation, but they always have to go together, because someone who, I need to emphasize again, according to Buddhist understanding, someone to become a Buddha means someone who is also become the Arhat as well. Because a Buddha just means somebody who is awakening in the early time. But later on, the later period understand the Buddha as someone not just awakening, like for example, like Kumarajiva, 就鸠摩罗什. So then they will always define that the Buddha is also someone not just awakening, but also could be able to awaken by himself without teachers, and also help the other to be awakened. 就是自觉觉他. And then can help the other people to be an Arhat. That's called the Buddha. Okay. All right. Up to here, I don't know whether you read the book before. Maybe no. But you have anything to say first? I don't want you just sit here like a dumb, right? Yes.
Just for the purpose of asking a question, because sometimes the Buddha was also used, besides that specific Buddha who founded Buddhism, also used for like a Guan Yin, also is Buddha, right? That's been, and also the Yu Lai, or maybe
Yu Lai.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yu Lai is the founder of the Buddha.
Okay.
So those can be used in the Chinese history as well, the Buddha. Yeah.
Right. I will just say a few things first. Now I will talk about the Lu Lai first. The word Lu Lai is one of the titles of the Buddha. Well, in original language, it means the Tathagata. Okay, the Tathagata. I mean, in Sanskrit. So the word the Ru, of course, is translation, a literal translation from the Ta means it's such a way. Agata is mean. In like old Chinese, you could say the word Qu, Qu or Lai. So it depends on the context. Just what sometimes say Qu, it could mean come. Like arrive here, 我去佛坛但是就是我来佛坛所以 anyway, so the word actually it's one of the title of the Buddha. Not only just the Buddha, not the Arahant, but Lu Lai, like the Tathagata, which actually Chinese people definitely like it. But I don't think in American people are familiar with the term like the Tathagata, because Buddha is much more powerful word now. But the Lu Lai, you ask anyone they know. Lu Lai, like 要是如来 So it's a title. It means actually the title, it means that someone who come to kind of like someone who come in, someone who arrive on this earth, you know, who understand the reality in suchness, in such a way. You are not going to say, you know, Buddhism always believes the rule is a kind of suchness. I mean, the fact is like that, then he knows the fact. So that's meant by suchness. So that's why it's called Ru Lai. And in earlier time, actually, the word Ru Lai in the early scriptures is the term that the Buddha always refer himself, like the Tathagata say so. He won't say the Buddha say so, but he will say the Tathagata say so. It was a term in originally, it's always used, you know, it's, you know, in old days you usually refer, sometimes you say, I want to say something. So I say this is a good thing, right? But in old way, in Chinese, the same, even in Indian culture, you don't say I say, you say he say, that's a good thing. You know, it's a great courtesy. You don't want to, you have to show your humbleness. You don't say I say. But then like that too, but someone who have to know the suchness to come here, say blah, 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 blah. So that's Ru Lai, the word we use in such a way. But then later, of course, in Chinese especially, Ru Lai become a very powerful honorary term. Like, I think it somehow even looks like even more powerful than the word Buddha also. Kind of like, you know, nowadays, a lot of what we believe in Buddhist circle, certain people believe that they attain Buddhahood, and they are, even though I'm suspicious about that, but anyway, that's how they believe, and they will call themselves as a four, what four, right? But hardly they will say Ru Lai, because it's somehow, anyway, in Chinese, it's kind of like carry much more like heavy, a much more powerful kind of connotation. The most powerful Buddha, yeah, something like that, yeah. But the Guanyin Avalokitesvara, traditionally, it's not a Ru Lai. Okay, but Guanyin Avalokitesvara as a Bodhisattva, let me just write down. Maybe you can see that. Bodhisattva. Sometimes we write Bodhisattva, okay? If I write SKD means Sanskrit, if I write P means the Pali, okay? Next time, so. It's Pusa. So, the Bodhisattva, in early connotation, it means, maybe you come to read the term, it always refers to someone who hasn't attained Buddhahood, but wonder how to become a Buddha. So in the early scriptures, always refer to the Buddha. I mean, you know, okay, the Buddha mean, I mean, it's very hard now to say that now. And that refer to mean the Siddhartha, okay? In his past life, during his past life, he could become Arhat. But he didn't attain Arhat because he thought he has to be the leader of the religion, kind of like that, or maybe. So he wanted to be a Buddha. Because he saw the past Buddha. I mean, okay, maybe I would say, okay, maybe let me see how to explain this first. The Bodhisattva. I mean, this is always a question for lots of people. In the early Buddhist scriptures, the term Bodhisattva is always referred to the past life, or not only past life, referred to before Siddhartha attained the Buddhahood. It's called the Bodhisattva. Get it now? So if you need me to rephrase, please get it now. Tell me. Let's say, so for example, he say, in the early scriptures say, you know, when I was a Bodhisattva, that means when the Buddha was a Bodhisattva, when I was a Bodhisattva, and he told his students, he say, I used to live in a very nice house. There were three kind of palace, you know, that my father offered me. During the winter time, I stay in the winter palace. During the summertime, I stay in the summer palace. During the, I think they have only 3 seasons, so they didn't say 4 seasons. During the other, like maybe the 4th season, what we call other seasons, rainy season time, so I stay in the other palace. So the Bodhisattva in early Buddhist scriptures always just refer to the same person, that means Siddhartha. But in the Mahayana Buddhism, later on, take like you say the Guanyin as one. So the Bodhisattva refer to those who wanted to become a Buddha. They hasn't reached to the Buddhahood yet. I know. But mostly, they could be living on earth, they could be living in the heavens, or sometimes even they could live beyond the heavens, kind of like a place. It's called a Bodhisattva. One of the powerful figure is a Guanyin. If you might be, especially you come to these temples, so you definitely see a lot. They're called the Avalokitesvara in Sanskrit, 就是观音. And but actually this is I'm not here to introduce Guanyin because otherwise it's too long. Generally, I mean, still at least it's a lot. How Guanyin came to Buddhism, what is the role of Guanyin? It's still a lot of discussion there. But I guess why don't we just learn that way first? I mean, at least in Mahayana Buddhism, there was one of the Bodhisattva, the word Bodhisattva, who vowed to become a Buddha one day. Actually, it's believed that he could become a Buddha, he didn't want to. So he still stayed as a Bodhisattva. Okay. Now, what is the biggest difference between the Bodhisattva and the Buddha is, and also it's the same thing, even the Bodhisattva has many stages too, they need to go through. And Guanyin Bodhisattva is different. He almost finished everything he should done. Just only something he had to left. Why? So that he could be reincarnated again. Yeah. If it's someone complete kind of reincarnation, kind of like physically, there's no way you could help any sentient beings, any persons. So, okay, that's what the Guanyin figure is important in such a way, okay? Because he has such great compassion. So he didn't want to attain the Buddhahood. Okay. It kind of like attain the Buddhahood means you almost done everything. You don't there's no next life to talk about. Okay. All right. Any other questions? What? Yeah, not the Buddha. Only the Bodhisattvas. Not even Arhat. Not Arhat. According to any tradition, it would be say the same thing. Not the Arhat, Lohan, and then the four. 没有称言而来 It's only Bodhisattvas. 只有菩萨称言而来 So, 称言而来 in other words, because in Chinese believe that someone actually you could reborn any way you want to reborn, or even though not necessarily you want to choose where you reborn, but you just want to reborn again in order to help the other persons. But my answer is those people are only, it could be the normal people, okay, say that, normal people. And then the other is only the Bodhisattva. Arhats and the Buddha would never be reborn again. Okay. All right. Any other questions? What you have thinking? What you just learn? Firstly, remember the Buddha as a title actually, and the Buddha had many titles, just like any other religion, especially like a Muslim. They told me that the word Allah, God, actually they have many names for them also, and the Buddha also had many titles. For example, now you know the title called the Buddha, and then you have the title called Arhat. You know, someone cut off all the reincarnation and all the defilements, and someone called the Ru Lai. Okay, and then the Buddha have those titles. And because they come here, you know, to understand the suchness there. And then also you have the title, for example, we call Samyak, Sambuddha, Samyao, Sampudhi, and those titles. And then you have the titles like the teachers of the gods and the humans, you know. And you have all different type of titles. But in other words, I mean, sometimes you have the title just to, you know the title, what's the purpose of title is because by normally by knowing that they have such a title mean they have such a quality, right? When you say he's the head of the monk, or he's the abbot, or he's the chanting monk, or someone who's a doctor, someone who's a lawyer, then you know that person, you know, presumably that person will have certain quality, you know. That's what and then the Buddha, of course, normally we have, according to any tradition, usually believe the Buddha in general, we know the Buddha have 10 titles, right? But it could be more than that, 20, 30, but even you collect all the titles. So that's what the... Anyway, Buddha is one of the titles only, which is much more, most popular title of the historical person who attained the Buddhahood. Okay. And I guess another thing is what I was just trying to, let me just repeat again, is they were in the West, one of the big things what the West actually did is that when after the British colonized India, and they know there was such a person called a Buddha and being worshipped in the Indian temple, and as one of the reincarnation of the God in Indian understanding. And then all these kind of idols that they see in India, and of course then they know one of the powerful person is the Buddha, because how they knew that? Luckily that because they also colonized Sri Lanka. Okay. When the British people colonized India at that time, the India was under Mughal Empire. That means the Muslim Empire. Even though a lot of areas still believe in Hinduism, but then actually many the empire was a Muslim empire. Now, but Sri Lanka is a Buddhist country, so and they certainly Sri Lankan people have their own belief of what the Buddha is. I won't say on. They believed there was a Buddha, and they also even believe the Buddha been to Sri Lanka 3 times, which is historically is impossible, right? But then any religion say the same thing. Like in China also, they believe that. Luckily, they didn't say that the Buddha been to China, but they always say the Maitreya Buddha was in China, the Guanyin was in China, right? And then Manjusri, Wensusri Pusa was in China. And Samantabhadra, Pusen Pusa was in China, and like that, right? Anyway, so that's the reason why in the West, when they study religion, one other thing they need to find it out, whether that's just a mythical figure, or whether that was really true that in India there was such a person was born, who was a prince and was born kind of like a person, and then he could transform himself and become a religious leader, as a Buddha, anyway. But then I think in the West now, this definitely for the West, when there's a West mean for the modern research or for academic, there was no question anymore. There was a person like that. Even actually Jesus sometimes been questioned whether there was such a person called Jesus. Really, there was such a person. And, definitely they also try to find some proof for that. But that's not what I'm going to talk here anyway. So, but the Buddha definitely, there's no question for the West already, for the academic, that there was such a person, who have attained the Buddhahood and become a Buddha. Okay, that was the first thing. All right, anything that if you don't have, we have a little break first. I don't want you to get hang up here for too long. Why don't we just have kind of like 10 minutes break, or and you could just read something, or you could think of something, and we are going, the next one, what we are going to discuss a little bit is about, now we also have to understand how the Buddha came from, what kind of background he came from. I mean, what kind of society it was. And why we have such a system nowadays like Buddhism. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, yeah.
So the format of this is just like we're going to go through a chapter by chapter, and then we're going to read ahead of time.
If you could read ahead of time, then because it depends. If you find, I usually like to just to give like the main theme